I found the power of attorney document in my son's briefcase while looking for aspirin. It was dated, notarized, and had my signature, except I'd never seen it before. That's when I realized he'd been practicing my handwriting for months. Before we start, don't forget to like this video, comment where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. Have you experienced something like this? Please let me know in the comments. My name is Margaret Patterson. I'm 66 years old from Seattle, and this is the story of how I discovered my son's betrayal and made sure his gambling debts became his prison sentence. It was a Thursday afternoon in September when everything changed. David had come over for what he called his weekly check-in, a new routine he'd started 6 months ago, always arriving with coffee and pastries, always so concerned about my well-being. That day, I had a splitting headache, probably from the stress of managing my late husband Frank's estate, which had finally cleared probate after 18 months of legal complications. "Mom, you look tired," David said, setting his briefcase on my kitchen counter with the casual familiarity of someone who'd grown up in this house. "Why don't you go lie down? I'll make dinner." I should have been touched by his concern. My son, the successful financial advisor, taking time from his busy schedule to care for his widowed mother. But something felt rehearsed about his kindness, like he was playing a role he'd studied but didn't quite understand. Still, the headache was real, and I needed aspirin. "There's some in your briefcase, right?" I asked, remembering he always carried a portable pharmacy. "You mentioned it last week." He stiffened slightly. "I'll get it for you." "Don't be silly, I'm already here," I said, reaching for his briefcase. His hand shot out to stop me, but too late. I'd already opened it. The aspirin was there in a small plastic container, but so was a manila folder labeled MP Estate Planning in David's neat handwriting. MP, my initials. I wouldn't have thought much of it, except for the yellow sticky note on top that read, "Practice 10x daily until perfect." David was in the bathroom. I could hear the water running. I opened the folder. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a power of attorney form, complete with my signature, dated 2 weeks ago, notarized by someone named Jennifer Walsh. The second was another power of attorney, same date, slightly different signature. The third made my blood run cold. It was a sheet of my signatures, dozens of them, photocopied from various documents and checks, with David's attempts at copying them below each one. Some were terrible. The most recent ones were almost perfect. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to retake several shots. I could hear David finishing in the bathroom, so I quickly closed the briefcase, grabbed the aspirin, and sat back down at the kitchen table. When he emerged, I was rubbing my temples, the picture of a woman with a simple headache, not a mother who'd just discovered her son was committing fraud. "Found it?" he asked, his voice carefully casual. "Yes, thank you." I swallowed 2 pills with water, letting my hand shake just enough to seem frail. "David, I've been thinking, maybe you're right about me needing help with the finances. It's all so overwhelming since Dad passed." His eyes lit up with an eagerness that turned my stock. "I'm so glad you're finally seeing sense, Mom. I can take care of everything. In fact, I have some paperwork in the car that could help streamline things." "Not today," I said weakly. "This headache, maybe next week." He agreed readily, probably thinking he'd won. After he left, taking his briefcase of forgeries with him, I went through my house like a detective at a crime scene. In my home office, I found evidence of his preparation. The drawer where I kept important documents had been carefully rifled through. Nothing missing, but everything photographed, judging by the slight repositioning of papers. My signature was on everything from tax returns to Christmas cards, and David had been collecting samples. I checked my bank statements online. No unauthorized withdrawals yet, but there were inquiries. Someone had been checking balances, transaction histories, investment portfolios. The inquiries came from IP addresses I didn't recognize, but the timing matched David's visits perfectly. Then I found his practice pad in the garage, hidden behind Frank's old toolbox. a legal pad filled with my signature, practiced over and over. The early attempts from 6 months ago were laughably bad, but the recent ones, if I hadn't known better, I would have sworn I'd signed them myself. The next morning, I drove to the office of Jennifer Walsh, the notary whose name was on the fraudulent power of attorney. She operated out of a strip mall between a payday loan shop and a liquor store, not exactly where legitimate notaries typically set up shop. "I'm verifying a document my son had notarized here," I said, showing her a photo of the power of attorney on my phone. She barely glanced at it. "Yeah, that was a couple weeks ago. Guy said his mom was too sick to come in person, but he had her signature. I don't ask questions if the signature looks good." "Did he pay cash?" "Always does." Always, meaning this wasn't his first forged document. I thanked her and left, my mind racing. In the parking lot, I called my attorney, Patricia Brennan, not the family lawyer David knew about, but the one I'd hired privately to handle Frank's more complex assets. "Patricia, I need a forensic accountant and a private investigator," quietly. She didn't ask why. Good lawyers never do. Within 2 hours, I was meeting with Marcus Stone, a former IRS investigator who now specialized in financial fraud. I showed him everything: the photos, the practice signatures, the bank inquiries. "Your son's in trouble," Marcus said after reviewing everything. "This level of preparation suggests he needs money urgently. The forgeries are good, but not perfect. He's been testing them with small documents, building up to something bigger. Has he asked you to sign anything recently?" "He's been pushing me to let him handle my finances since my husband died." Marcus nodded grimly. Classic pattern. Create a crisis, offer to help, then take control. "Mrs. Patterson, we need to find out what he owes and to whom. Men don't commit fraud against their mothers for fun. They do it when they're desperate." The private investigator, a former Seattle PD detective named Janet Chen, worked fast. Within a week, she had a complete picture of David's secret life, and it was worse than I'd imagined. David's successful financial advisor image was a carefully constructed lie. His office was 2 months behind on rent. His house was in pre-foreclosure. His wife, Nicole, had filed for separation 6 months ago, right when he started his weekly visits to check on his poor, overwhelmed mother. But the gambling debts were the real problem. David owed $400,000 to various bookies, with another $200,000 to a casino in Nevada. The dangerous kind of creditors, the ones who break fingers first and ask questions later. He'd been juggling payments, borrowing from one to pay another, but the house of cards was collapsing. He's been making minimum payments using advances from credit cards taken out in his business name, Janet explained, but those are maxed out now. He's got maybe 2 weeks before the really bad people come calling. And that's why he needs my power of attorney. Your husband's estate was valued at $3.2 million, correct? Plus your personal assets? I nodded. Frank had been a successful commercial real estate developer. Between the properties, investments, and life insurance, I was worth nearly $5 million, more than enough to solve David's problems and leave me destitute. Janet pulled out another file. There's more. He's been in contact with a company called Senior Transitions. They specialize in helping families transition elderly parents into managed care. They were scheduled to evaluate you next week. My blood went cold. He was planning to have me declared incompetent? The power of attorney would give him control of your assets. The incapacitancy ruling would make it permanent. You'd spend the rest of your life in a nursing home while he liquidated everything. I had 2 options: confront David immediately or let him hang himself. Patricia, Marcus, and Janet all recommended the second option. Give him enough rope, Patricia said. Document everything. Build an airtight case. So I played the role of the declining widow. When David visited that week, I made sure to seem confused about dates, to repeat myself, to struggle with simple tasks. It killed me to see the satisfaction in his eyes, but I needed him confident, careless. "Mom, I really think we should get those financial papers in order," he pushed, pulling out a fresh power of attorney form. just in case something happens. Oh, did I not sign those already? I asked, feigning confusion. I thought we did that last month. His eyes gleamed. No, Mom, but we can do it now. I pretended to struggle with the pen, making my signature shaky but recognizable. What David didn't know was that Janet was in the house, hidden in Frank's old study, recording everything with a camera that captured both video and audio. The signature I gave him was close to real, but deliberately flawed in a way only a handwriting expert would notice. I'd practiced it myself, adding a tiny hook to the M that I never used in my real signature. David practically glowed as he tucked the document away. This is for the best, Mom. I'll take care of everything. The next day, he was at my bank, trying to access my accounts. The bank manager, Mrs. Yoshida, called me immediately. I'd warned her this might happen. Stall him, I said. Tell him you need additional verification. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I didn't go to the bank alone. Patricia was with me, along with Detective Raymond Shaw from the Seattle PD's Financial Crimes Unit. We'd filed the complaint that morning, complete with all the evidence Janet and Marcus had gathered. David was in the bank's private office when we arrived, his fake power of attorney spread on the desk, explaining to Mrs. Yoshida how his poor mother needed his help managing her overwhelming finances. He'd even brought a briefcase full of supporting documents, medical articles about dementia, a letter from a doctor I'd never seen claiming I showed signs of cognitive decline, brochures from senior transitions. When I walked in, clear-eyed and flanked by my lawyer and a detective, David's face went through a symphony of emotions: surprise, fear, anger, and finally, desperate calculation. "Mom, what are you doing here? You should be resting." "I'm protecting my assets from a son who forged my signature and tried to steal my husband's legacy," I said calmly. "Detective Shaw, I believe you have some questions for David." The detective stepped forward. "David Patterson, you're under arrest for forgery, attempted fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft." David jumped up, the chair falling backward. "This is insane. Mom, tell them you signed these papers." "I signed one paper yesterday with a deliberately false signature while my investigator filmed you committing fraud," I said. "The other power of attorney documents, the ones you've been shopping around town, those are forgeries, and we can prove it." Mrs. Yoshida had already called security. 2 guards stood in the doorway, blocking any escape. David looked at me with such hatred that I barely recognized him as my son. "You set me up." "No, David, you set yourself up the moment you decided I was worth more as a bank account than as a mother." David's arrest made the Seattle Times front page of the business section. "Financial advisor arrested for attempting to defraud mother of millions." The story detailed everything: the gambling debts, the forgeries, the planned incompetency scheme. His professional licenses were immediately suspended. His remaining clients fled. The divorce Nicole had started became a stampede for the exits. During the investigation, more victims came forward. 3 elderly clients reported suspicious transactions David had made on their behalf. A widow in Bellevue discovered he'd been slowly draining her retirement account, always just below the threshold that would trigger alerts. The FBI got involved when they found he'd been moving money across state lines. But the most damaging evidence came from David's own devices. He'd been stupid enough to text his bookie, Tony Castellano, about his plans. "Mom's worth $5 million. Once I get POA, you'll have your money within a week." Castellano himself was arrested 2 days later, caught in a sting operation that David's case had triggered. Facing federal charges, Castellano flipped immediately, testifying about David's gambling history, the threats he'd made, and most damningly, David's offer to pay double if Castellano would deal with me if I proved difficult. "He said accidents happen to old ladies all the time," Castellano told the court. "Stairs, medications, whatever. He said once she was gone, everything would be simple." I sat in that courtroom, listening to my son plan my murder as casually as ordering lunch, and felt the last thread of maternal love snap. This wasn't my child anymore. This was a predator who happened to share my DNA. David took a plea deal, 7 years for fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. The federal charges could have meant 20 years, but his lawyer argued that gambling addiction had impaired his judgment. I didn't attend the sentencing, but Patricia did. She said David tried to make a statement about being failed by his family, abandoned in his time of need. The judge shut him down, calling him a calculated predator who violated the most sacred trust between parent and child. Nicole divorced him while he was in prison, taking their 2 children and moving to California. She sent me a letter apologizing for not warning me sooner, but she'd been terrified of David's gambling associates. I wrote back telling her it wasn't her fault and setting up education trusts for my grandchildren, money David could never touch. I sold the family home, too many memories, both good and poisoned. I moved to a secured condominium building with multiple verification requirements for any financial transactions. Not because I'm paranoid, but because I've learned that the people who should protect you are sometimes the ones planning your destruction. I volunteer now with an elder fraud prevention group, telling my story to rooms full of seniors who can't believe a son would do such things. I show them David's practice signatures, the forged documents, the text messages about my accident. I watch their faces change from disbelief to horror to determination. Check your statements, I tell them. Question sudden affection. Trust but verify, especially with family. Last month, I received a letter from David in prison. He wanted to reconcile, to explain his addiction, to rebuild our relationship. He even mentioned having found religion, complete with Bible quotes about forgiveness. I didn't reply, but I did send the letter to Patricia, who added it to the file labeled Evidence of Continued Manipulation. Because that's what David never understood. Forgery wasn't his only crime. He'd forged more than my signature. He'd forged his concern, his love, his entire relationship with me. And unlike a signature, those forgeries can't be fixed with practice. I'm Margaret Patterson. I'm 67 now. I survived my husband's death, my son's betrayal, and an attempt to erase me from my own life. My money is protected, my home is secure, and my signature is my own. David gets out in 6 years with good behavior. When he does, he'll find that I've moved without leaving a forwarding address, changed my phone numbers, and made sure every financial institution in the state has his photo on their fraud watch list. Some people say I should forgive him, that he's still my son, that addiction is a disease. Maybe they're right, but addiction didn't make him practice my signature for 6 months. Addiction didn't make him plan my institutionalization or discuss my convenient accident. That was greed, pure and calculated, and I don't forgive that. The aspirin I found in his briefcase that September day, I kept the bottle. It sits on my desk now, a reminder that sometimes the smallest things reveal the biggest betrayals. Every morning I look at it and remember the moment I discovered my son was forging more than documents. He was forging himself into my life's destroyer. But he failed. I'm still here, still sharp, still fighting. And every signature I write, every check I sign, every document I authorize is a small victory over the son who thought my handwriting was worth more than my hand itself.